Hello, everybody. Welcome to our very first episode of Over the Rainbow, Conversations with Artists from Oz. We'll kick you off with an introductory video telling you about our first artist, conductor Alexandra Enyart.
Alexandra Enyart is a rising orchestra and opera conductor. Praised for her musical finesse and technical grace, she serves primarily as music director of Thompson Street Opera Company, as well as guest conducting for Chicago Fringe Opera, Third Eye Theater Ensemble, Chicago Vocal Arts Consortium, and another voice collaborative. As a transgender conductor, Alex strives to create a more equitable and diverse musical world. You can also find Alex working with Resonate, an all-transgender choir with a mission to foster acceptance of all voices and identities. Alex has many talents, including composition. This month, her piece Witness, written for one voice and banjo, played as a double bill with Juliet Palmer-Stitch with Third Eye Theater Ensemble. Alex believes that to conduct is an honor and privilege, and continues to work and support and strengthen the musical community, of which she is privileged to be part of. Please help us in welcoming to HAPA, Maestra Alexandra Enyart.
Hello, Alexandra. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here today.
We are delighted to have you here. Thank you for starting this series of 5 artists as we talk about the journey to Oz and the stories of success and what home means to you. And we're so excited to have you here.
Well, thank you so much. I'm honored to be the first step in a fantastic series.
And audience, I would like you to know that we also have Henry Clifford with us, who is a student at Hammond Academy for the Performing Arts. Hello, Henry. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
Henry.
having me.
Of course, absolutely. So Henry is going to be monitoring the chat. So please do enter your questions along the way, live audience. We want this to be an interactive conversation. So we will have a couple of opportunities throughout this talk today where Henry will be your representative. He will be posing questions that you are placing in the chat in YouTube or in Facebook. Okay, thank you, Henry. We'll see you soon. All right, so Alexandra, so we are going to start with the iconic line in Over the Rainbow, the iconic line in Wizard of Oz, which is "There's no place like home." Our theme this year for the Hammond Academy for the Performing Arts is finding home. So I want to pose the question to you, what does home mean in your eyes?
Home is really interesting right now. And home is really interesting because everybody is getting to look into it all the time. Home is often a place where we have this kind of privacy and security in a different way. But because of Zoom, even right now, you are inside my house. So here is my bed.
Yes.
It's just a small, all of these things are together. And so right now, whenever I'm doing shows, whenever I'm doing things where I'm performing, from social distance and from this quarantine distance, it's all happening in my house. And I think that there's something really special about that in inviting people into home, because home to me feels like intimacy. It feels like sharing of space. And I think that inviting and sharing our homes and sharing our space together is a really powerful thing that we get to do right now. And while we don't get the intimacy of sharing space physically, sharing home in a way makes up or maybe creates a different environment for that. So home has been really interesting right now. And I think that there's a lot about, like I said, about security and intimacy and just finding a place that you feel comfortable and then getting to share that.
So to follow up on that, I know we're going to talk a lot tonight about your production Witness, which I know was inspired by the soundscape of your growing up, right? You're from Louisville, Kentucky, and this show, which we're going to get to, you're going to bless our ears with a little bit of this show from Willow Song in just a few moments. But it's completely for voice and banjo with a cameo from your beautiful wife and guitar. And so I wondered if you could speak a little bit about growing up in Louisville, what the soundscape was like there, and how home fed into your composition.
So I actually grew up 2 hours outside of Louisville in a small city called Alexandria, Kentucky, with 10,000 people. And it's in a part of Kentucky that can be described as urban Appalachia, which is to say, Appalachia, we know the Appalachian Mountains. Alexandria is right on that edge. It's about 45 minutes away from Cincinnati, Ohio. So you still have some of that city feel, but at the same time, you're definitely out in the hills and in that sort of environment. And so the area where I grew up was, I mean, soundscape wise, I mean, it's pretty country oriented, and yeah, I guess it's a bunch of pickup truck culture. I mean, it's an area. The school I went to, for example, there was only one person of color in my entire school. It wasn't until I went to college that I really experienced diversity in Louisville. Louisville's exciting in that soundscape, and that one of the things that was really significant to me going there and moving is that they have a jug band festival every year. And, you know, all those things I thought were very goofy and very Kentucky. And of course, I was anxious to move away from them in a way, and to kind of escape from this culture that can be seen negatively, and to kind of move somewhere to a big city. But once I got here, I realized how much I loved that, and it meant to me is a feeling of where I grew up and just where I came from. And so playing the banjo and picking up the banjo was part of my way to reconnect from Chicago, and to figure out how to resonate back to home and resonate back to the safety of my family, and just missing family and all those feelings. And so I think that a lot of the banjo playing comes from a desire to find pieces of home and find pieces of where I felt comfortable in. It's basically a way to experience nostalgia, but take it into the right now. Because we don't want to look back so far that we don't look at what's happening. I mean, you have to look back, but you want to make sure that you're looking back and looking forward at the same time. And on top of all of that, living in right now, living in a moment, because it's so easy to live somewhere where you aren't. And just to be in a moment. And so playing the banjo helped me do that.
So I want to follow up a little bit. I'm inspired by the questions that we gathered from the student body. So one of the questions that the students asked was if you could speak a little bit to what it was like growing up in Alexandria, 45 minutes outside of Cincinnati, when you said that it's like urban Appalachia. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, so what it was like for me, I mean, it was a difficult place to grow up in some ways. It was a place that I both loved because it was the only home I had, but now looking at it from where I am now, realizing how many of the challenges that I had came from that sort of environment. But it's an environment that was stifling in some ways and had lots of conformity to a specific idea, and that specific idea being white Christian male, and having that whole culture around it. So there wasn't a lot of freedom in some of the challenges of growing up and figuring out who I was and who I am, and all these things. Definitely, I think that it added time to that journey, and in navigating how you have to be part of this culture and part of this fairly conservative culture that is Kentucky. At the same time, I grew up in areas with beautiful hills. I mean, I was around horses fairly frequently. Like, I mean, that's a thing, just being out there. So there are aspects of the country itself that I really appreciate. I feel really connected to nature and really important in that. In other aspects of Kentucky, one of the things that I feel like I've learned a lot is that even if there's something that's an issue. So for example, I don't agree with coal mining. I think that using coal is a challenge, but coal mining is a really important thing in Kentucky. And I do feel for the miners a lot. And there are issues, and I think that that can relate to a lot of different issues where even if someone maybe is in an environment that you don't agree with, it's the power structure that that's their only choice. And so to abandon them is also very wrong. And you've got to make sure that you're helping working class people who are doing their very best to support themselves and their family.
So I think you have an interesting perspective in that, and growing up in the environment that you were in that particular culture, and then now living in Chicago and living in a much more diverse culture, do you feel like that experience has allowed you to grow empathy for sort of both sides of this very divided world that we're living in?
I do feel like it's given me more empathy. It's challenging because obviously every time that I come down on issues of home and the culture around home is that there are people there who frankly wish that I didn't exist and wish that people like me didn't exist. And so it's very hard for me to say, well, both sides are equal, that way.
Sure.
Or that like the moving to Chicago is a safer, more comfortable place to be. All that said, there are still people there. And the fact that they grew up in those systems, in some ways, I feel pity for them in a different way, because when I see them, I see who I could have been if I didn't get out. And I think that there's a significance about small town culture like that, is that I grew up in an environment where I knew that I had to leave when I turned 18. Like when I graduated and I had lived there and I had been a kid there, and it was time to go be an adult, I knew that I had to go somewhere else. It was not going to be possible for me to still be there and to be successful, or else I would just be part of that culture that I didn't want to be part of.
So in that vein, if you could go back and give advice to, say, 10-year-old little Alex, what would you say?
It's tough because it's one of those things where I don't know if there's anything that I could say in a way, if that makes sense. Because one of the things that's interesting about a question like that, right, is this idea that of going back and changing what happened. Well, I think that a more interesting way to approach the question from my point of view is that we carry our 10-year-old self with us all the time. So in that sense, I can say that my 10-year-old self is very proud of me because I have her with me. I know who she is, and I have that. And sometimes we look back and we say, how would I have thought about this moment at that age? And the good thing is that we have these pieces of us always. And when you have your 15th birthday, you also have your 14, 13, 12, all the way back, and you carry all of that with you all the time. So, but to get to the point of, if someone else were in that situation and was 10 and in an environment like that, the most important thing, in my opinion, is to hold on to this idea of loving yourself as you are today, because we so often work on transitions, and everyone does. People love to use the word transition as if it's a special thing for trans people, but everyone is transitioning. Everyone all the time is going through change. And as you're going through your transitions, as you're going through change and navigating those things, so often we see an end goal and we say, I will love myself when I get to this end. But you have to love where you are today, because you may not get there for a while. And even if you do, our end goal of end goals, like the very end of this whole everything, is dying. That's the end of the game. So don't rush to the end. You have to make sure that you love where you are right now and enjoy each day. And it's really very, very challenging, because especially with trans issues, if you're not taking hormones and you want to be, it's very hard to love your body. It's very hard to navigate how those things are. But holding on to that and being able to love yourself and still go towards a goal is really important. And I would say that's the most important thing that I've learned about being trans through my journey. And I would want myself as a 10-year-old to know that.
I love what you said about carrying every stage of life with you, and that as an adult, that we are not this sort of segmented or separated personality from the person that we've been the entire time. So thank you. That was so beautifully said.
Yeah.
What a lovely vision.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So, I think this is a really great segue into the next bit that we're going to talk about. Because you had just said that, rushing to the end, that we have this goal in front of us, and that we want to get to that place of whatever it may be, of acceptance, or of being happy with myself, or loving myself, or whatever that goal is. So at Morton High School, where that's a part of HAPA, we have character focuses each month. And our character focus last month was the word ambition, which I think is a really interesting term. So I was once again inspired by questions that came in from the students when it came to, you said that when you turned 18 that you just knew you had to get out. So what would you say was the biggest motivator for you to then go to college and to pursue music and pursue your dreams?
Yeah, so I played for a long time. My mother was a professional English horn player and oboe player. My dad's a drummer and so both played in pit bands and pit orchestras for musicals all the time. And so I grew up in these different environments. When my parents split, I kind of rebelled against classical music, but I rebelled in the sense that I said I don't like it, but I was still playing in the band and I was playing clarinet. So I went on, and that all meant a lot to me. It wasn't until I really was hearing Shostakovich and the clarinet parts in there that I got really excited, and I just wanted to play, and I wanted to play more. But I also knew that I wanted to be a conductor around that time also. And so that was really exciting. I thought I wanted to be a high school band director for a while. But then when I got to college, my ambition in this case just kept growing, because I wanted to perform with my colleagues. So when I was a high schooler, my colleagues were high schoolers. And when I was in college, I wanted to work with colleges. And when I got out, I started working professionally. And it's just a matter of doing these different things where really I just want to work with fantastic colleagues and other musicians. And I guess that's the most exciting thing. I believe in music for the sake of human connection. For me, human connection is first, music is second. And I think that's really important, because there are other people that go music first, human connection second. And I really strongly disagree with that. I think music is a tool for humanity, and to put it ahead of humanity is a mistake, in my opinion. But the good thing is the world is very diverse, and it is useful to have people who put music first, because they come up with some really interesting ideas. So just because you may disagree, I think the diversity of that is very exciting.
So at this moment, because I think the audience actually has a question that's really apropos to what we're talking about right now. So Henry, can I go ahead? Let's bring you in. We've got 2 questions coming from the audience.
Okay, so our first question is from one of our students in HAPA. It is, what is your favorite part about holding an all transgender, transsexual orchestra in the height of this political climate and current election?
So I work within all trans choir. I don't work with an all trans orchestra. I don't know of one. I think that would be very exciting. So there is something exciting about rebelling by existing. And I feel like pride, when we talk about pride as a word and what that means, it exists right now because people have told us our entire lives not to have pride, especially where I grew up. All I knew before I knew the word transgender, I knew that it was shameful and something to be embarrassed about. And so pride is really powerful in navigating that. And I think that there's something about the power of sharing in space together and overcoming and continuing to be, that's really important. Of course, it's a stressful time, and I'm sure everybody is feeling that. It is stressful. but it's really important to stick together and to have that shared space. And I think that's the most important piece is that, and that it's powerful. It's powerful, and it's fun to be powerful, and especially when people don't want you to be.
Yeah, well said. And our second question is, people see orchestra as a very classical and reserved form of art. So what our HAPA students would love to know is it as accepting and embracing of its diversity?
Sometimes. I mean, sometimes. It's really hit or miss. I've had some very positive experiences. I've had some fairly negative experiences. You get a mixed bag. Orchestras are obviously full of people who are diverse in and of themselves. But when you look at systems of power and systems of structures for who has been given the opportunities to succeed historically, obviously the orchestra still resembles that in some ways. I mean, women conductors in and of themselves, as just being a woman conductor, that still is, it's not a new thing, but it's still like something that is talked about and discussed, and this thing to navigate. Being a transgender conductor, on top of that, is an interesting thing in that, as historically, there's really only one other that I know of who's Angela Morley, and she only worked in film scores and work like that. So there aren't videos of her. You never see her, and I think that's part of how diversity happens for conductors and for performers is that the first woman conductor ever, as far as I'm aware, started in the opera pit, and part of that is because the opera pit is not center stage, and so there are aspects of these that really have to be overcome. That said, there are orchestras that are devoted and dedicated and really committing to their mission, and really working on becoming more and more diverse. Where I was getting my master's, Louisville, the Louisville Orchestra is really working on creating change because they have Maestro Teddy Abrams, who is, it's that young energy, and young energy is powerful. Youngest conductor of a major orchestra in the country. And then here in Chicago Sinfonietta also is dedicated and devoted to diversity, and that all starts with Maestro Paul Freeman, who had a really powerful experience where Martin Luther King Jr. came up to him and told him that being a Black man on the podium was so important and so powerful. So there are definitely institutions that are committed to that. There are individuals within other institutions and the institution of the orchestral and operatic world at large that are less so.
Well, thank you so much for answering those two questions.
Of course.
We'll see you in a minute, Henry. Thank you. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about, we're going to go into your latest creation, which was a COVID project of yours that premiered, I believe it was in July, correct, for the first time, and then was a double bill.
I think so.
Yeah. So could you talk to us a little bit about the inspiration behind this story of witness that has been described as seeing the challenges of navigating the world as a woman as well as a trans woman? Mm-hmm. And could you speak a little bit more about what your inspiration was there?
Yeah, so Witness is a really organic project in that September of last year, I bought a banjo. I'd never played a banjo. I started playing a banjo. By November, I had written a song. By March, I had written 14 songs. Mm-hmm. And then I put them together. And I wrote them carefully so that they would have a form to them, because I'm a conductor, and so I think a lot about form, and working to create some sort of shape and story. And yeah. I approach music from a story first perspective, and really care a lot about story. And again, as a humanity first musician, am most interested in that human element. There are other, again, people who work from a music first, like some of the certain minimalists, things like this, really fascinating also. But nonetheless, so it comes from a place of sharing humanity and really sharing vulnerably my experiences. And I'm tired of seeing transition stories where the whole story is about, this before and after, as if it's framed that way. And Witness is just about living and experiencing and being. And so it's kind of linear in growing up. It's also not. There's just bits and pieces of things all over, and I think that's the exciting thing about it. So I've really enjoyed getting to do it. I'm not a singer. I mean, I'm not classically trained as a singer in any way. Again, banjo playing, I've played a year and 1 month now. And it's something where, as a clarinet player, I practiced hours and hours. I would spend 4 hours a day practicing clarinet, and then play another 4 or 5 in rehearsals and things like that. So you're spending all day long practicing. And it's so funny that like the success I've had comes from banjo, which I've played, I mean, thousands of hours on clarinet and then like a month on banjo and things are happening. But there's something about the freedom of being an amateur again, where as musicians, we so get into professionalism. And this, we land into, I only perform in these circumstances and things like this. And basically, when I started, being able to be trash at an instrument was really powerful. Like it was really nice to just be able to be bad. And that quickly changed and getting to work on those. But I mean, sitting in my house for a lot of hours with gigs canceled certainly contributed to Witness and the amount of time, because I would wake up at my usual time as if I would work, at like 7 a.m. or whatever. And then I would play banjo all day. And that was how I was spending my days during COVID. So it's been, and of course, COVID still ongoing. But anyway, Witness comes about from all of those different aspects and is just really a celebration of getting to play, and especially in a time where it's very hard to be seen and how it's hard to be, it is just challenging. We're all alone in some ways, but all together in other ways. It's a tricky thing.
And thank you for speaking to that notion that we have to have some level of perfection or some level of mastery before we can invite an audience in. I think that was one thing. There's so many things I was inspired by in watching Witness. But one thing that came to mind is as a voice teacher and a professional singer myself, I hear from my students across the board, but especially the trans students that I have worked with, that there is so much fear around and dysphoria around the act of singing. So seeing you compose this piece for banjo, which, as you said, you've only worked with for a short period of time, and then to also put yourself out there with Third Eye Theater Ensemble, who is traditionally an opera ensemble, and to offer your voice. You're typically a conductor and a music director for them, but to then sort of flip the script and to be the performer and be the singer, I just found that to be I loved the message behind that of to not have to have this place of mastery before you can offer art. So would you speak more about, I know I brought up a lot of topics in that sentence, but maybe to gender dysphoria and how that plays into your singing voice, and then what it was like to put yourself out there in that way.
Yeah, so it's hard. I have had many days where I would sing and cry. And I did. I would sing and I would cry. And I, for a long time, felt, why have I lost my voice? Why was this taken away from me? Why do I have to have a voice this way? I went and did an opera workshop where all the conductors had to sing in the chorus. And here I am being me, as I am, singing the bass line. And so I was running around, and it was a funny thing where there were, it's a chorus of butlers and maids, and it's all these butlers, and then there's me, the one woman butler, doing this whole thing. So it was a funny thing, having to do that, and navigating those things. It felt not great in lots of ways, and of course it creates a really exclusive environment, and that's the sort of thing that unfortunately you have to push through. And I am sorry, obviously I wish that the answer wasn't you have to push through it, because it's not your fault. It's not our fault that it's like that. And it's not anyone, like it's not anyone who's experiencing that sort of push. It's not your fault that you have to navigate that way, but you still have to occupy and exist in those spaces. So it takes an incredible amount of courage to do the same sorts of things that other people get to do. But the reality of it also, from my experience, is that there are plenty of cis people And in fact, one of the things I think it should just be said is that trans people are incredibly, incredibly normal. Everything that we're experiencing is really the same as what people experience. Sometimes it's more severe because it has to do with identity, and that gets really hard. But regardless of that, this insecurity in navigating singing, I think a lot of people resonate with insecurity singing, and finding the power to share yourself, it's very hard. I wish that I had a better answer for how to do it, besides it's kind of taking that leap. And you have to find people that you trust, because it has the potential to be embarrassing. People can be very mean. And that's just a really unfortunate reality. So you have to build an armor to sing. And I feel like singing especially has these real things. That said, I listen to non-classical singers a little bit and just get in there. Some of them sing like their voices, and in a classical sense, are absolute chaos, and they sound amazing.
Yes.
And it's about creating something, and if you are carrying a message, then it doesn't matter. And I think that's the most important step in how to feel comfortable, is to say a message to you that means so much that you don't care if you're going to have issues. And as a final thought on that is that I think it was Renee Fleming who said she sung how she wanted to something like 5 times in her career. So if Renee Fleming has only hit it 5 times, then I give myself permission to miss many times and be okay.
Well said. Absolutely. So going back and kind of looking at there's a question on the table that we'll get to in just a moment. I'll have Henry come back and pose about the process of writing. But to dive into that just a little bit. So I was struck by, you were talking about what it was like to be trash, at playing the banjo, and to get into that space of really being an amateur again. Mm-hmm. And it brought up for me, I'm a certified yoga instructor. And one of the things that we talk about quite a bit in that realm is to always keep a beginner's mind and to go back to the basics on a regular basis as a part of your practice. So I know that chakra meditation was a part of the structure in building witness. So I wonder if that beginner's mind was a space you were coming back to as you were building the form.
Yeah, so I think that a lot around the chakra, I'm very Pinterest spiritual is how I say it, in the sense that I grew up very Christian, lost that faith in some ways, and have a yearning for some sort of spirituality. And, that's just my particular answer to it. And of course, everyone is going to find their answer. And I want to keep stressing, because sometimes I feel like people say things as if they have found the right answer. I just want to make sure that I'm stressing that this is the way that things are working for me today. It doesn't mean that's how it will always work, or whatever is happening. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but there's the diversity of exploration that is really exciting. So with that in mind, these chakra explorations have been powerful for me to find some grounding and some sense of control over how I process and how I navigate things. And so getting to explore working and coming with humility, I think, is really important. One of the teachers that I had said that the 2 most important things to succeed, if you have kindness and competence, you'll always succeed. And so I had my own 2, which is, if you have courage and you have humility, you're always going to be fine. So I would say courage and humility are going to put you in a really good place, and then kindness and competence will pretty much keep you any job you ever want. It's not the best way to always, unfortunately, it doesn't always get you the job. That's where the courage and helps. And it really is about humility. You're going to work some interesting jobs as a musician, and they're not going to be all music related. It's a trick to put the whole lifestyle together. But having that to keep going and to keep doing things, and then once you're in there, to be right on top of the mark and very nice. The age of the tyrant conductor is dead or dying. It's no one younger than 40, 50 can do that. And even people who are 40 or 50, it's not a good look. And that's the thing. So the environment is changing in that way. There are so many people who want to do this. You have to learn to be a colleague. I mean, if you want to be a leader for 70, 80, 100 people, you can't be a jerk. It doesn't work. So yeah, it doesn't keep you a job. It may get you a job once, but not beyond that. So yeah, keeping that humility, and then keeping those 4 characteristics, I would say, are really important to the way that I view life.
So you remind me so much of what I'm reading, Brene Brown's book right now about daring greatly, and she talks a lot about leadership and that leading with vulnerability versus leading through shame. And I think you spoke to that so beautifully just now, and that the age of leading through shame, or those tyrant conductors that through the Me Too movement, I personally think that has shown a light on a systemic problem in not only opera, of course, but in all fine arts. But it's also pulled the power dynamic into greater focus. So thank you.
A real power of being a transgender conductor is that every single time I step onto the podium, I am very vulnerable. People can and have been in rehearsal quite aggressive with and to me, and that is something that happens. And so the very existence of me on the podium is an act of vulnerability, and in doing so, that is how I have to navigate, is one where I'm aware of the fact that I'm very aware of the fact that I come without some of the power, in a way that comes with being seen a certain way, and that is really significant in the way that I have learned to approach things. That said, I do feel like the way that I approach things is much more powerful now than it ever was before, because when I came out and stepped on the podium for the first time in front of the orchestra, the sound that hit me was entirely different. When you have the trust of every single person, and they are believing in and cheering for and all of these things for you, it is an amazing experience. And it's one where you can inspire people just by being around. If you go from a place of really humble vulnerability, and at the same time, that's where that competence comes in, making sure, I feel like as a conductor, I work a lot. I don't really let things slide, in a way, in terms of like hearing things, but never meanly. The harshest thing I ever say, and I have it as my bottom line for anything, is that's not acceptable. That is unacceptable. That's the farthest it is. And even when I fire people, the hardest thing I ever say is that's not acceptable. And it's nothing personal. It's not acceptable for whatever we're doing. And if you cut that as your bottom, is the meanest thing you can possibly say, that's a important and safe place. And I learned that from my clarinet teacher, who would say, "Nope, sorry." and nope, sorry is a really powerful way to say we're going to do it again without being really rude about it. And I think that's really important.
Beautiful. So that brings up a question actually coming from the student body previously is, what would you say to a young person? The people that are joining us today are mostly high school students that are in a public pre-professional school. And so what would you say to that audience when it comes to the biggest advice that you have for them as far as going into school and looking at the path professionally?
Absolutely. So there was a big report that came out. The 2 most important choices in a musician's life are financial. And of course, I want to talk about all the art, but it's really important to talk about these 2 things. And they happen at really vulnerable times. The first choice is, how much debt do you go into at school? And that's really hard. A good education where you can play and practice a whole bunch and really make music. But if you're paying so much that for the rest of your life you're looking at $80,000, $100,000, $120,000 of debt, it's very, very hard to navigate that, because
Yes.
You still need that fluidity of some funds, and it's not super easy to make money musically. So it's a really, it can tie people's hands a lot. So I would say the most important thing right now is to seriously be thinking about what financial future am I giving for myself when I graduate college, because yeah, it's really important. It's really significant. That said, college is a fantastic place to go ahead and practice, but it's really significant to remember that you're paying for every moment you're there, and you have to work like you're paying to be there, because college isn't a job, but at the same time, it's like this place where you're in this really weird place where you're old enough to have a job, but at the same time, it's weird and it's tricky, and so I would say that, and also in the master's and beyond higher degrees, making sure that, I had a friend who didn't go very in debt for undergrad, but went very in debt for the master's degree. And then you pick up that $60,000, $80,000. It's hard to get out of. The second most important thing that this review said is what city you move to after you graduate, because the cost of living can be really prohibitive. I would not move to New York. And in fact, I didn't, because New York does not offer opportunity for people to get started. The ensembles there are ensembles that I'm breaking into now. Chicago is a place where you can really grow and make things happen, and you can really be an entrepreneur. And you see a lot of entrepreneurship in Chicago. But there are other cities like that where you need to find and look for the right combination of growing art scene with appropriate cost of living. And that's going to be a judgment call that you're going to have to make for yourself as to what that is. But just moving to somewhere with a great art scene, if the cost of living is really high, the art scene is just going to be out of reach. It's going to be really challenging to get in there. So I think those are the two most important pieces. And really, I mean, on a realistic scale, is making sure that the reason that so many storefront opera companies, so many opera companies are existing in Chicago, so much opportunity, is because, frankly, the cost of rent makes it possible for people to spend time doing this. And if you live somewhere where you don't have those opportunities, it's very hard. And then beyond that, everyone here really knows how to make it. You have to practice a whole bunch. You've got to work really hard. And then you have to set yourself apart and make sure that you don't become a musical machine. You can be a musical machine, and there are people who play Phantom of the Opera every single night on Broadway and have fantastic careers.
Yes, they do.
And those are great. But at the same time, to really break out as a soloist or a conductor, or in other ways like this, one, it is aspects of luck, but two, it is about setting yourself apart, and then finally, be prepared for things to go differently than you expect. I definitely didn't expect. I've made half of the money that I've made, or actually, sorry, 25% is from playing the banjo, which wild, just out of nowhere. But it really is a matter of find stuff, do stuff, market stuff, learn how to make things happen, take risks, find cities where you can take risks. You have to figure out how to take financial risks, though, because it's a tricky thing. Like, there is a pay-to-play nature to our environment. And if you can't go to workshops and things like that, which I totally understand, because I couldn't in some cases also. When I couldn't go, I built a opera company so that we could just build our own. Yeah. And it's those things that are really significant to do, because unfortunately, there's a lot of money that goes into this. And if you're playing from a disadvantage to start with, or even if you're playing with an advantage, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. But if you're playing with a disadvantage, you're going to have to work extra hard. And it's going to be a tricky thing. So that said, college debt, cost of living when you move, those are the two most important pieces of the musical career. And they're very unappealing for musicians to hear or talk about, but they're very important.
Thank you for saying that. I think that's something I wish I would have heard earlier in my journey. So I think, yes, that's great. Fantastic advice. So at this time, Alexandra, I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind to bless us with, you said that 25% of the money that you have made in your musical career has been since you picked up the banjo. So yeah. So if you wouldn't mind, will you set us up a little bit about Willow Song, and then we would love to hear.
So this is Willow Tree. It was one of the earlier songs that I wrote. When my parents got married, they planted a big old willow tree in the backyard, which was supposed to represent their marriage. They divorced, the willow tree died. This is not so much about the sad parts of the willow tree, but more of just, well, I guess it's about both sides of it, but it's just some Appalachia vibes. So here we go. Beneath a willow tree, you share with her your ear. Sleep among clouds and be relieved. Lay down your head in a peppermint patch. Inhale the earth dancing on your tongue. Drive over a vein and reveal blue water. Look out in the storm and fall into a thorn bush. Sprawl out on pink asphalt, melting through the stars. Press your eyes shut. The wind has left your face. Lay down your head in a peppermint patch. Inhale the earth dancing on your tongue. Naked poetry that says what it is. A hint of control where none can be found. Thinly veiled line that wants something different. Hoping for change that won't come till it comes. Lay down your head in a peppermint patch. Inhale the earth dancing on your tongue. Live to be perfect for that someone. always come up short, but not to them.
Yay, fantastic. I'm over here smiling because, first of all, just thank you. Thank you for your offering. And I will say, personally, as a singer who has gotten to work with you, it is just so apparent to me, Alexandra, that you bring such joy to everything that you do. And that was no exception. So thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, I would like to bring Henry back to pose. We've got several fantastic questions. Thank you for being so participatory, audience. And I'll turn it over to Henry.
Okay, well, like Miss Odom brought up earlier, there was one question that wanted to dive in a little. What's the construction and process of writing a piece of your music?
Okay, so writing music, really exciting. So the first thing that I do when I'm writing is I just start messing around and just see. So like this came about because I was like, there are 5 strings on the banjo, and I said middle, outer, outer. What happens? And I just got some stuff. I've also done things where it's like, and really getting into just like the top ends or like playing off here. There's so many things, and not playing the banjo like in any formal way, actually I feel like helped explore. So the first thing I do is I just collect sounds and just what can I do? What's interesting? What do I like? And then the next thing is to create a shape. So the most, if you're writing a song, like is the most basic level, the easiest thing to do is to have a verse chorus structure. So a chorus obviously is something that is repeating. So a chorus section, so you can build that in and you find what your chorus. So in that case, it's lay down your head on a peppermint patch. And once you have that, you know what your chorus is. Then you build verse, so you build text around that. And then you start picking your sounds that you've already established and what sort of sounds you're putting. And then you just start putting those all together. And you can add other elements, but you do verse, chorus, or a shape like that is the easiest beginning. And if you want to write just instrumental thing, picking an easy form, look up some basic music forms. I mean, rondo form, dance forms like the minuet, looking up sonata allegro. If you can really describe how the form works, you can really start writing. And then it's just a matter of, like sonata allegro, A section, a B section to start. So even if you don't know anything else, you just need idea 1, A, idea 2, B, and then start putting them together. It's a little bit more complex than that in classical forms because they have these specific ideas of how harmonies are to work, but we live right now in 2020 and you're allowed to do whatever you want. So explore, have fun. And a lot of the music that I've written before this, you know, I wrote music starting probably my sophomore or junior year. Some of it is okay. Some of it is totally bad. And again, it's the chance to be an amateur that's really important, because if you don't, it's just like drawing. I'm really bad at drawing, but I started doing it because I wanted to be better at it. And the only way to get better at it is to be okay with the fact that some days you will do bad things. And I think even at every level, as a conductor, you have to accept that some days it's not going to be great. You know, it's those days get fewer and fewer the higher level you get, but you're always going to have a day where you do something that's not really very wonderful. And being okay with that is really important to being an artist. Being a perfectionist, it's going to be really hard to be happy with writing music. Unless you like writing really specific music run on computer programs, in which case I love it. I mean, I just love sound. I think the key is to love sound. If you love sound, not even music, but if you can go outside and listen to a rain gutter drip and you say, that's really interesting, what would that sound like in something? I feel like that's the kind of attitude that has really helped me to just explore and start putting different things together. But look up musical forms and just start putting different pieces together and try. You know, why not? And if the first thing you do is an A idea, a B idea, and then that A idea again, you've done something, you've written something, and that's great. The act of creation is very powerful.
I think that's amazing because there's my friends and I in HAPA are working on creating something with music, and I love seeing the different ways people work and making their own music, like your process, and everybody has different processes, and I think that's amazing to see how you got your process. I'm the same way. I literally sit at my piano and I play random things and then I try to figure it out. So it's cool to see that even without talking to somebody, a lot of people can do the same things but also very different things.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think the most important thing is to keep on it. And even if you get, regardless of whatever feedback you get, to keep going and to believe in things, because just like I said about singing before, if you believe in the message, then you'll love the piece. I mean, the message always wins, and the pieces that are most important from composers that I've heard, the pieces that stand out in their life, are pieces that they truly believed in the story and the communication they were actually telling.
Of course. And our last question from our student body is, what advice would you give to the kids struggling with their sexuality and how it is okay to be a part of the LGBT plus community?
Yeah. So I want to take a second because I want to make sure that I answer this correctly, or maybe not correctly, but the thing that people say all the time is you are valid, and you are valid is a great way to get at things. But what I think is really challenging in navigating this idea of validity, and what that means is it becomes such a phrase where it stops having meaning in a way. Like if everyone just says you're valid, then what does that even mean? It stops mattering. So there's real importance for me in remembering that reality is first, language is second. We call a chair because we have a word for something. But what is a chair really? If you look at an armchair with arms, you call that a chair. If you look at a folding chair, you call it a chair. You know, it's all of these things where we have put a word to something that is an attempt to capture reality. Language is not reality. And I think that's really significant in dealing with identity, because so often we box ourselves in by language where it says, I am this, or, oh, how do I express how I'm feeling? There aren't words for it yet. And there may not be. There might be words that express how you're feeling, but you have to navigate how they relate to you. The word transgender to me may mean something different to another person. Mm-hmm. And that's where the reality of it is more important. And the life that you're living is important. But all of that is tricky when you're trying to qualify it in a system built by people who are not like you. I mean, if you're LGBTQ+, or if you're in any way feeling like a minority or an outsider, we didn't really build these structures. And so the language itself doesn't support us. And so even in that, it's really challenging to deal with and hard to remember sometimes that you're fighting against a system that you're a part of, in the same way that for young women, we internalize misogyny and you create these things, and young men have to deal with all this internalized toxic aspects of masculinity. And being trans, I got a chance to see a lot of both, which is exciting in a way, but it's a really challenging thing. Everyone is struggling with these gender roles and expectations, and these expectations, where do they come from? Who do they belong to? Why are we holding ourselves to them? Why does that matter? And it's language. It's language. It's trappings of language, and we're all getting tied into them. That what does the word man mean to you? What does the word woman mean to you? What does the word straight mean to you? All those words are conjuring up ideas, but is that real? No, kind of. Like, That's the thing. It kind of. And so you have to, in my opinion, it's really important to break down for yourself, what words am I using? How am I associating those words with what I'm thinking about? How do I actually feel, and how am I navigating that? Because it is challenging, but when you accept a reality, if you just take away everything and you don't think about it as I'm gay or I'm anything, and you just say, I love, and who you love is irrelevant, it's just the act of loving that matters, then that's great. And I feel like that's the place to be. Is if there's one word that we got right, it's love. So hippy dippy, but it is really significant. And I think that has lots of power. So labels are important in qualifying our world. And when there are language issues, I mean, people not using your pronouns, that's why it becomes an issue, is that they're putting language on you, and they're putting language and that becomes an issue. But really taking a step back away from language every now and again, I think is really important. And in doing so, maybe the word valid will resonate as it is in reality, and not as it is in the letters VALID, just as, because it loses meaning without whatever emotion, without whatever feeling it was originally supposed to convey, and has now lost. And that's where enjoying music is really significant. You know, some people like to say that Tchaikovsky's music doesn't have gayness in it, but yes, of course it does. You cannot escape it. It's so engage with it, enjoy, and it's okay to have a hard time. It's okay for things to take a while, and that's where you have to love yourself where you are today. And it's okay to question. You know, if it was, the world should exist in a way that people can say, I think that I'm transgender, and then say, I wasn't, without being mocked and ridiculed for it. But the same as, I think I'm transgender, I am. You know, I think that I might be gay. You know, it's these things. Why is it that even the thought of I think I might be is somehow a crime to certain people, and then the very thought that it could happen puts you into a camp, and trying to fight against that divisiveness. Just, you are an individual, and your journey is going to be your journey, and the only person you owe anything to is yourself, because we all get the one shot at everything that's going around, and the only person you're beholden to is you. And it may feel a lot like you're beholden to everyone else, but those are illusions that are perpetuated by systems that don't care about you as an individual and care about you in the sense of what you can produce for others. And I think it's really significant to break away from those, for everybody, for every single person, to break away and to say, who am I? What biases do I have? How do I think about things? What is my reality without words? Just what is existence to me? And I think that is powerful. And in the meantime, if you're dealing with unsupportive family and unsupportive home life, it's very hard. I would say the most important thing is to rely. You have to build a support system that is yourself, so you can rely on yourself, and then a support system of others. And there are plenty of people that, especially I'm certain where you are, and anyone watching this stream, I'm certain you have connections who will care for you and will care, and that you can trust. And family isn't always the people that you were born with, or whatever matching blood is. I mean, none of that has ever actually really mattered beyond choice. I mean, it's up to you to choose who you want to be around, what you want to be around, and what you do. And it's hard. It's hard, but it's getting better. And one of the things I talk about all the time for trans people is the reality is that over half at some point attempt suicide. And I really, I consider it in a lot of ways the primary goal of my life to help lower that number. And I really hope that if you're feeling in a place like that, you have someone that you can reach out to, and in moments, because it's very hard. It's very hard. And I would never try to take away the fact that it's hard, but you just have to keep going. And by getting up every day and keeping on and making things happen, the world keeps changing. Change happens slowly.
I love the you going into it's about love. I think that's a very important thing. I've said that too, and at the end of the day, that's all the world needs right now is love. So I think that's a very great way to put it. So thank you so much.
Of course, and thank you, and thank you to anyone who's out there speaking and talking about their experiences. I mean, it takes all of us. So
yeah.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you.
So as we, I feel like this could go on for hours. I just would love to continue to pick your brain. But unfortunately, we just have a few minutes left. So in closing, I want to pose this question, where this whole series is about talking about the first question about what home means to you. And then also that journey that we see in The Wizard of Oz, the yellow brick road, to this sort of elusive place that exists called Oz, where once you arrive at that place, that it is, that all will be well. That your wishes will be granted, and that you will find wholeness and never look back. We think about Disney stories, right? Which I think Into the Woods is such an interesting musical, in that we get that second act, right, where we get to look at what happens after the happily ever after. And with Wizard of Oz, that journey to Oz is about those characters feeling like they were missing something, that they were missing a heart, missing a brain, that there was something that they needed to find, and that someone else outside of them needed to give them. And then what they realize is that they had that all along. So my question for you, you said that the journey of your life is being able to lower the number. There's such a high rate of attempted suicide in the trans community. Something that I was really struck by in watching Witness is just the transparency that you have when it comes to fear, and the sort of fear of being found out on a train. You talk about that specifically in Witness. But also coming back to that word love. There's this beautiful moment for anyone who didn't have the opportunity to see Witness. There's this beautiful moment where your wife joins you on stage and you sit facing each other, and she's playing the guitar and you're playing the banjo. And the words that stuck out to me in that particular song are, "You have the courage to play your role." Mm-hmm. So what I would like to ask you is, what do you feel like in your life right now and in this moment? Would you say that you have arrived? Would you say that you have found this elusive word, success? And if so, or if not, what does that look like? Yeah,
so I think that yes. It's an interesting thing. I laughed when I saw the question because at first I was like, the idea of success is a hilarious one. This of everything that's happening and what's going on. But the success for me, it's not about the fact that the success is that I am married. I have a partner who loves me. I come home every day to her. I have 3 rats and 2 ferrets. I'm happy when I wake up and going to work, and I'm happy when I come home. And some of those days I go to work in music, and some of those days I don't. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about these things. Right now I work part-time as like a dog daycare camp counselor. So I play with a bunch of dogs all day. Awesome. It's an amazing thing. Like it really has been nice, but that's part of, rolling with the punches with COVID and things like this, and part of finding the success. So my income is a combination of playing with dogs, playing the banjo, and conducting bizarre, masked, really far apart ensembles right now, and making click tracks, because that's how everything is happening right now. So amen. But that does feel like success. I didn't necessarily realize it until it was framed that way in some ways. But will there be more success later in the future? Yes, it will look more successful from an outside point of view. But at the end of the day, when I was dating, when I was getting married, engaged, all these different things. Coming home, waking up happy, going home happy, that's success. Anything else is bonus. Getting to make music is one of the greatest joys in my life, but it wasn't until I got married that it took second place. Of course, I didn't even know if it could. I was one of these people where I truly believed that music was the first and foremost aspect of everything I cared about in my life, and treated it that way for a long, long time. But it's really the being home that feels like success. And it's a tricky thing. It's not what I had thought it would be, for sure. I live in a really small house, and there's a lot of different aspects of things, but it's happy, and I think that's a win. I know people who have much bigger careers than I do who aren't happy, and I wouldn't trade places. And that's kind of it. I think whatever your balance is, there's really no reason to do things for other people. Like, your ambition will keep pushing you forward. And like I said, when things come back and things are going, I have big gigs again I've gotten to do. Like, in terms of other success on paper, I've gone to Russia, I've gone to Australia, I get called, I get to do all these fantastic things, conducting Costa Rica. Like, I've gotten to do incredible opportunities. One of my highest paying gigs, I got $1,000 a day over 7 days. It was a lot. It was a whole bunch, but that money is rare. And even when you get it, even if you can balance it out, it doesn't last all that long in the long run of things. So just collecting money and doing things like that. What's crazy is that $7,000 a day gig, I did the exact same ethic of work that I do all the time. And my first gig, I spent way more time working, and I got $100 for the entire thing. So I did a whole production for $100 at the beginning, and that took all the work I'd ever done. And then I did this remount where I'd already done the show. I basically showed up, conducted, went home, and got paid a ton. So it really, the money has almost nothing to do with what you're doing, and just happens to be related to anything else. Your art itself is really, really disconnected. And so, my viewpoint on money is that you have to understand the financial choices you're making around debt, but you should probably not plan on making a whole bunch, or if you do, it probably doesn't have a lot to do with who you are as an artist, and more to do with just kind of luck and what circumstances you're in at any given time. So I think that those are all really important to remember around success. But as long as you're happy, you won, you did it. So that's great.
Beautiful. So for the members of the audience, I know that they're going to want to know what's coming up for you next.
So next, that's a good question. So next, I'm working with Thompson to do a commissioning project where we are doing 3 new operas. So that's really exciting, and that'll be coming up in December. After that, we're working on Faulty Systems with Bonsai Bermudez, who runs YEP, which is Youth Empowerment Performance Project. And that YEP they work with LGBT youth experiencing homelessness. So this is called Speaking Out, and is about different issues within Pride. So that'll be really exciting. After that, I'm supposed to be flying to Orlando to work with Opera Orlando, but who knows what that will actually, I've had 4 or 5 gigs come up and go down over the course of all of this. So who knows when the next time I'll actually get on a plane is, but hypothetically, I will be in an actual theater again by March. So we'll find out. That seems ambitious, but you never know.
And where could the audience members find more information about these gigs that you just told us about?
So if you go to alexandraenyart.com, you can find me there. I also have a Facebook, which is Alexandra Enyart. And then on Instagram, I'm Alexis Enyart. And always happy. You can also reach out if you have more questions. I have a contact me page. I'm always happy to see it go across. My social media is run by my wife, actually. So if you message, you might get her. It's been very funny. She says I'm not very good at it, so she's been doing it herself.
You're a great team.
Yeah, which works. It's really helpful to have a partner like that. One of the keys to success is that I've built around me a team. I have an audio engineer that I go to. I have my social media team. You get your whole thing going. So
absolutely.
Helpful.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to use this time too. So remember that this artist series is leading up to our opening of Wizard of Oz, which is opening on November the 12th at 7 p.m. We're going to pop up a poster here so you can see all of the times. It's the 12th and the 14th at 7 p.m., as well as the 15th at 2 p.m. You can get your tickets now at hammondapa.booktix, which is TIX, as you see it on the screen, .com. And Alexandra, thank you so very much for your time and for your vulnerability and for sharing your story with us. It's really been a joy getting to talk to you tonight. So thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Henry, for being our student representative. We couldn't have done this without you this evening. So thank you very much, Henry, for monitoring our chat. And thank you, audience, for your thoughtful questions and for participating in this conversation. Our next talk will be this upcoming Monday, November the 2nd, where we will be sitting down with Jonathan Sobreras, who is an operatic tenor based here in Chicago. So please check out our Facebook page as well as our YouTube, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thank you again, Alexandra.